I'm here, where they're searching for little Gus Lamont yet again. After weeks of silence, unanswered questions, and fading hope, the search is back on. The quiet of South Australia's outback has been broken by the rumble of army trucks, the hum of police helicopters, and the whispers of a community that never stopped asking the same haunting question: why now? Why, after officially calling off the search more than a week ago, have authorities returned to this barren land? Did new evidence come to light? Or did someone make a critical mistake when they decided to stop looking the first time? Each day that passes, the mystery only deepens. A 4-year-old boy vanishes from his grandparents' front yard in broad daylight. No witnesses, no cries for help, just the sound of wind over 150,000 acres of unforgiving land. And now, weeks later, officers are back, combing every inch of Oak Park Station, desperate for answers that have eluded them since that September afternoon. Because somewhere between the silence of this desert and in the shadows of a family's pain lies the truth of what really happened to little Gus Lamont. Before we go deeper, I want you to remember, every share, every comment, every new set of eyes could make a difference. If you believe stories like Gus's deserve answers, tap subscribe, hit the bell, and help bring attention to the cases that can't afford to be forgotten. Because somewhere out here, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered, and together, we're going to find it. Before we go deeper, I want you to remember, every share, every comment, every new set of eyes could make a difference. If you believe stories like Gus's deserve answers, tap subscribe, hit the bell, and help bring attention to the cases that can't afford to be forgotten. Because somewhere out here, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered, and together, we're going to find it. September 27th, a quiet Friday afternoon on Oak Park Station, a sprawling 150,000-acre sheep farm in South Australia's mid-north. The kind of place where time moves slowly, where the wind hums through the saltbush, and the nearest town is nearly an hour away. 4-year-old Gus Lamont was out front, playing in a small sandpit near the homestead. He loved it there, building little hills and roads for his toy trucks, giggling under the late afternoon sun. His grandmother, Josie Murray, was nearby, tending to chores around the front yard. Nothing seemed unusual, nothing out of place, but within minutes, everything changed. When Josie came back outside, Gus was gone. At first, it didn't feel real. She called his name, expecting him to pop out from behind a bush or a shed. But there was only silence. No laughter, no movement, just the still hum of the outback. Panic set in. The family began searching every corner of the property, the sheds, the paddocks, the nearby creek beds. For hours they shouted his name into the fading daylight. No response. By nightfall, reality hit. This wasn't just a curious child wandering off. Something was wrong. At 8 p.m., police were called. Within hours, Oak Park was transformed into a command post. Helicopters swept the property with infrared cameras. Police officers and volunteers formed search lines that stretched across the land. Drones hovered overhead. Even divers were brought in to check nearby dams and water tanks. But despite the scale of the operation, no sign of Gus, not a piece of clothing, not a toy, not a footprint, except one small print, found days later, believed to be his. But even that, experts said, might have been left long before the day he disappeared. The land gave up no answers. And for investigators, the silence of Oak Park became more haunting with every passing day. By the end of that first week, hope was slipping away. And so was the trail. The search for Gus Lamont had officially gone cold. Oak Park Station, a name that sounds peaceful, almost serene. But anyone who's been here knows the truth. This land is as beautiful as it is brutal. Stretching across 150,000 acres of dry plains, jagged creek beds, an endless horizon, Oak Park sits more than 300 kilometers north of Adelaide, far from the noise of city life. The air is dry. The wind cuts across the plains, carrying dust that settles on everything. The fences, the sheds, even the search vehicles that roll through. During the day, the sun bakes the earth. At night, the temperature plummets, turning the open land into a cold, echoing emptiness. It's easy to get lost out here, even for adults who've lived their whole lives on the land. There are no street signs, no landmarks, just the same rolling scrub in every direction. For a 4-year-old boy, alone, frightened, and barefoot, survival beyond a few hours would be almost impossible. That's what makes this case so hard to understand. If Gus had simply wandered off, search teams should have found something. A trail, an item of clothing, a footprint. But there was nothing. Authorities mapped a 2-kilometer search radius from the homestead, covering every gully, dam, and sheep track. Then, as the days passed with no results, they expanded it to 5 kilometers. Still, no trace. Even the army struggled. Their trucks got bogged in the loose sand. Visibility dropped as dust clouds thickened around them. At one point, 2 military vehicles were completely separated from their convoy, lost in the haze. This isn't terrain that forgives mistakes. And yet, this is where police believe Gus vanished, without sound, without struggle, and without a trace. Some in the community believe the search was called off too early. Others whisper that new evidence must have surfaced. Evidence strong enough to bring investigators and soldiers back to this desolate land after so many days of silence. Whatever the truth is, Oak Park still holds its secrets tight. The same soil that feeds generations of sheep and farmers may also be hiding the answer to what happened to little Gus Lamont. As the search dragged on and the land refused to give up its secrets, the focus quietly began to shift from the outback to the people. The Lamont and Murray families are well known in this part of South Australia. They've lived and worked here for generations, tending to sheep and surviving the harsh rhythms of the land. At the center of this story is Gus's grandmother, Josie Murray, a woman described by locals as private, intelligent, and fiercely protective of her family. Josie, who was once known as Robert, transitioned after the death of her father-in-law, a decorated World War II veteran. It was a deeply personal decision, one that the local town quietly accepted. But inside the family, sources say things weren't always so simple. Josie and her wife Shannon still live together on the homestead, a symbol perhaps of endurance, or maybe of quiet distance. No one outside the family really knows. Living with them is Jessica, Gus's mother, a young woman with long curly blonde hair, strikingly similar to her son's. She shares the home with her youngest child, 1-year-old Ronnie. But Gus's father, Joshua Lamont, doesn't live here. He stays 2 hours away, in the town of Glen North, a long drive across winding rural roads. He and Jessica maintain what's been described as a commuter relationship. He visits when he can, but according to locals, tensions between Josh and his in-laws have always existed. That tension came into sharper focus when details emerged that Josh only found out Gus was missing after police woke him up at home, hours after the disappearance. He wasn't there. He didn't hear the screams or join the first frantic search. He learned his son was gone from a knock on the door. Since then, both sides of the family have remained publicly cooperative with police, but the weight of scrutiny has been heavy. It took 6 days for the family to release a photo of Gus to the media, a delay that drew sharp criticism online. Some said they were too private, too guarded. Others defended them, saying grief makes people act in ways that outsiders can't understand. Through it all, the family has stayed silent, choosing to speak only through official channels, a choice that, intentionally or not, has fueled even more speculation. Because in cases like this, when evidence runs dry, people start looking at behavior, at what's said, and more often, what isn't. And in the mystery of Gus Lamont, that silence is beginning to sound louder than ever. From the very first night, the disappearance of Gus Lamont became one of South Australia's largest search efforts in years. Police, SES, and volunteers poured into Oak Park Station. Helicopters hovered low over the paddocks, their floodlights sweeping across the barren terrain. Drones mapped the dry creek beds. Even police divers searched nearby dams, troughs, and water tanks. For 7 straight days, the operation ran around the clock. Convoys of trucks and 4 WDs set out every morning from the small town of Yunta, a speck on the map with barely 60 residents. They combed through every ravine and gully, forming long human chains under the relentless sun. Still no sign of Gus. The only clue came 3 days in a single footprint, found about a kilometer from the homestead. It seemed to match the tread of the small boots Gus had been wearing. For a moment there was hope, but it didn't last. An Aboriginal tracker later examined the print and concluded that it could have been days old, possibly from before Gus vanished. And with no other footprints leading away from it, the trail went dead. No discarded clothing, no broken toy, no evidence of an animal attack, just nothing. Then, almost as quickly as it began, the search was called off. Officials announced that they'd exhausted every lead. Behind closed doors, sources said investigators had quietly shifted their focus from rescue to recovery. It was no longer about finding Gus alive. It was about finding Gus at all. For the next week, silence. No updates, no press conferences, only speculation, frustration, and heartbreak. Until suddenly, this week, the search resumed. 80 Army personnel, dozens of officers, a doubled search radius, expanding from 2 kilometers to 5. Something had changed. Something had brought them back to this place. But police won't say what. Not yet. Was it new intelligence, a tip-off from a local, or regret that the first search ended too soon? Whatever the reason, Oak Park Station has once again become the center of a mystery that's grown colder and more unsettling by the day. And as crews retrace their steps across the dust and scrub, one haunting question continues to hang in the air. What really happened to little Gus Lamont?